to my dear children, Raymond, David, Justin, Iliah, Kylene, and Shone. I wanted to do a series of videos for you all to share with you some of the things I have learned over the past several decades about this book called the Bible. I've spent most of my life studying it, looking at it, learning from so many great teachers. It's very difficult to put this all together and understand this book. I could only touch on a few parts of it, even if I had a month's worth of videos to give you. I wanted to share with you how great this document is in reality and history. Outside of our human experience, outside of our five senses, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the universe, Elohim, and as I call him, Elohim Yehovah, my heavenly Father, my Father in reality. He has reached out through time and space and dimension to go ahead and give us this book. To accurately get into this, I would have to give you some predated information about our family. And that's part of what I'd like to do in form of introduction here. Many years ago, after I became a believer and I was married and had my first two children, I wanted to know who the first believer might have been in my family. I wanted to know if there was a lineage I could look back to. My aunt, who had never written to me in my entire life, nor contacted me, suddenly sent me a letter. She was quite excited that I had an interest in discovering this truth. She wrote me a letter and she told me about my great-grandmother on my father's side. She was a Blackfoot Indian from South Dakota, whose family, along with the group of Indians she lived with, were all slaughtered, if you will, with a battle with the U.S. cavalry. She was one of the few survivors, and she was brought into Canada to a Catholic orphanage. As I've been told, she met a man who became her husband, and they ended up having 9 children, of which my grandmother ended up being the youngest. She was a small woman, as most Indians were, and her hair was as long as she was tall. And the description I was given is that she had 2 streaks of gray hair from the center of her head that went down both sides of her long hair, which must have been 4.5 feet tall. I don't know how tall she was. She was rather short, under 5 foot. There was a plague going around, and it was killing many, many children. Many people were losing their families. And my great-grandmother, having been raised in the Catholic organization, prayed to the Heavenly Father that if he would spare her children, she promised to move them to a location where they all could attend church, and she would see to it that they all would attend church. Well, somehow or other, they made it all the way to Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a very unique place in this country. Its motto is hope. It is the smallest of the states, and it was the last state to sign the Declaration of Independence. So that made 13 states that did so. 13 is a unique number, and typically it may point to the breakup of government. And in this case, it was the breakup of the United States away from the government of the British Crown. She was an industrious woman. She went ahead and baked, and that's how she helped support her family. And if you can understand what it took to bake back in the day, where they basically heated stoves with wood and all day long, it might have been a 10-12 hour day to do what she did, to go ahead and make pies or whatever else she baked to support the family. But what was remarkable about all of this is Father heard her prayer and honored it. For when she brought them to Rhode Island, they all attended Catholic church. Not one child died. Most families were losing 1 or 2 children, and that was in a medium-sized family. She had an exceptionally big one with 9 children. That was pretty exciting for me to learn, because I wanted to begin to know and understand how things move forward with the spiritual growth of our family. During the Great Depression, my family lost everything they had, and I found out subsequently both sides of my family lost everything they had. On my father's side, they owned a bunch of inland area, which today about 10,000 homes are built on. And my grandfather on my mother's side owned a bunch of coastline area in Rhode Island. In 1938, after the Depression, a hurricane came through and did a lot of damage to that property. And as time went on, they eventually lost everything through taxes, both sides of the families. Well, I was fortunate in the fact that my dad and grandfather were stonemasons, and my grandfather, he went ahead and built the police station, the church, a World War II monument, a building called the Racine Building in Rhode Island. And I ended up attending St. Matthew's School, and my tuition was free. Our whole family's tuition was free. So I did receive a good education. As far as spiritual matters go, it was only up to the extent that the Catholic Church could teach their doctrine. I don't hold that against them. It's what they knew, what they understood. As time went on in my own personal life, there are a lot of things that I have encountered that I would say are extraordinary and out of the ordinary. And it began when I was a little child. When I was very young, a spirit used to come from underneath my crib and talk to me. It's quite an astounding thing to say. For me, I didn't understand that it was extraordinary or out of the ordinary. It was just what it was. I used to talk to the spirit. It was like a gray figure. And one time, as I was perusing the internet, I saw a creature, and they call it an Alma from Russia. And when I saw that creature, it reminded me of that spirit that used to come underneath my crib. Okay. As time went on, I encountered another spirit, one that came out of my brother, my older brother. I have a half-brother. He went ahead and came out of a basement that we had, and he was attempting to frighten my 2 younger sisters and myself in the house. He was there to babysit. Well, he did. He frightened me quite a bit, because when he came up out of the cellar, a spirit literally leaned forward out of him, and I saw it. And then it went back, and I screamed. As time went on, I lived my life in that state, in Rhode Island, until I was 17 years old. My father had gone to California. When he got out there, he went there with my older brother. My father had a broken back, and he was suffering with that, for years, but he still did construction. And in February, I believe it was 1976, he asked my mother if I would fly out to California and help him work. Now, I'm a 17-year-old boy in my junior year of high school, and my father wants me to quit and come out and work with him. Well, I did so. It was the only way for our family to survive. I had to physically work, and I did. He moved us all out to California. It was quite an ordeal. But in the process, I could not go back with him. We were a working class family. They didn't have the funds to send me back. When he needed to go back, he needed to sell a house and do some work on it. So they left me with some cousins in Southern California and San Diego. Now, as time went on, my cousin Diane, she was about 30 years old. I was about 17. And Diane was a phenomenal artist. She could draw Egyptian art just like it looked in the books. Just perfect and fantastic. She had great skill. And everything she drew was very earthy, if you will, in colors and texture. And very angular. One morning I came into the kitchen and she had put a picture on the wall of something that disturbed me greatly, because this picture had two heads that were, basically the focus of the drawing. And these creatures looked very much like what you would see in all the movies today of gray aliens. This oblong head, big almond eyes, big solid black eyes. Everything was rounded, to a degree, and she even drew the crest on their head. And she also had a lot of pastel colors. They were bright silver. I mean, it was totally different than any art I ever saw that she drew. And every time I looked at the picture, I did not feel good. And I asked her, I said, what is this? And so she proceeded to tell me a story. This story was that during the night, two creatures had gone into the room and attempted to take her with them. And she said there were, basically a hierarchy with these entities, whatever they were. One wanted to take her, the other one did not. And she said she had a crucifix, and she said she took her crucifix and she prayed. And it's her terminology. She said, if they're going to take me, they're going to take me with my God, which she was referring to Yeshua HaMashiach. Well, evidently that stopped them, whatever she did, whatever she confessed, and they wouldn't take her. So she's telling me this story, and I said, this picture you've drawn, it disturbs me too greatly. I said, God, I can't stand to even look at it. So she did take it down. As time went on, she had some friends that were next door, and they, in turn, had a friend who used to come over. And this woman was a blonde-haired woman, a bit older. And she was from Russia. She had escaped Russia by walking through Siberia. She had gone the opposite end and gone through China and made her way to the United States. Let me continue this on another video.